on channel 224 Sky Cable and TV Plus boxes. Simulcast on DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Informing, advising, and entertaining the Filipinos and OFWs around the world. Streaming live on www.facebook.com/DZRJ 8:10 a.m. or on YouTube, channel DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Radio Bandido.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.
This is G. Santos of 𝗪Ｃ𝗶𝗶, an interactive program. Join me and my co-anchor 𝗪tože as we learn together how to lead a mystical and magical life through alternative ways on DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Radio Bandido TV.
Watch and listen to 𝗪Ｃ𝗶𝗶, Saturdays, 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Airing on Sky Cable Channel 224 and on all DTT boxes. Simulcasting online on Facebook and YouTube. Listen and watch on your mobile devices. Just search DZRJ Radio Bandido.
Ito si Arnel Doria at ito ang Good Trip. Ang lingguhang biyahe po natin sa mundo ng travel, transportation, road safety at environment. Alamin ang mga pangyayari may epekto sa araw-araw nating buhay bilang motorista, commuter, siklista, pedestrian o simpleng mamamayan. Tutok na sa Good Trip dito sa DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Radio Bandido TV.
Watch and listen to Good Trip every Saturday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Airing on Sky Cable Channel 224 and on all DTT boxes. Simulcasting online on Facebook and YouTube. Listen and watch on your mobile devices. Just search DZRJ Radio Bandido.
Kami ang inyong abogado ng masa.
Ako po si Atty. Nikki De Vega.
At ako naman po si Atty. Carlo Nicolas.
Ng
Ang Buhay at Batas.
Libreng payo ng abogado.
Solusyon sa problema mo.
Dito lang sa
DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Radio Bandido TV.
Watch and listen to Ang Buhay at Batas every Tuesday, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Airing on Sky Cable Channel 224 and on all DTT boxes. Simulcasting online on Facebook and YouTube. Listen and watch on your mobile devices. Just search DZRJ Radio Bandido.
Hi, Raul Virtudazo po ng UGM, Ugnayang Gobyerno at Mamamayan. Samahan niyo po ako at ibibigay ko sa inyo ang mga balitang dapat alam niyo. At tatalakayin din natin ang mga issue na may kinalaman at may kabuluhan sa ating buhay. Dito lang sa DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Radio Bandido TV.
Watch and listen to Ugnayang Gobyerno at Mamamayan. Mondays, 4 to 5 p.m. Tuesday to Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. Airing on Sky Cable Channel 224 and on all DTT boxes. Simulcasting online on Facebook and YouTube. Listen and watch on your mobile devices. Just search DZRJ Radio Bandido. You are watching the multi-awarded Radio Bandido TV on channel 224 Sky Cable and TV Plus boxes. Simulcast on DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Informing, advising, and entertaining the Filipinos and OFWs around the world. Streaming live on www.facebook.com/DZRJ 8:10 a.m. or on YouTube, channel DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Radio Bandido.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.
Hello, Philippines, and welcome to the World News Jam here on DZRJ and Radio Bandito TV. My name is Eric Lecain, coming to you live from the beautiful Makati, Manila. We here at the Jam talk about what's going on around the world, the biggest news that's been happening outside of the Philippines, so you here in the Philippines can stay informed. Now, today, we're going to go through a multitude of stories. What's happening with Elon Musk, and why are people all of a sudden hating him? And what's the scoop between Elon and China anyway? Also, is America really getting rid of the Department of Education? And besides that, is it really safe to travel to the U.S. now? Especially if you don't have a green card? Or maybe if you do have a green card? Well, if you're from Venezuela, you might want to think twice about that. And how are those ceasefires going in Israel? The answer is not good. So let's get to discussing some of these subjects. But before we do, I want to talk about a story that is somewhat personal to me. The Rumble in the Jungle. Can anyone remember that? I watched it at my grandmother's house, who at the time was the only person we knew that had a color TV. See, this all happened back in 1974, the time of the G.I. Joe with the real hair and the Stretch Armstrong. So it's all the time when boxing was big, when everyone would crowd around the TV for the wide world of sports with Howard Cosell and watch a fight. Of course, at the time, Muhammad Ali was the biggest name. He was not only a world champion, but someone that pointed out the fact that black people were treated different than white people. But also there was another famous fighter at the time, a man named George Foreman. Unlike Ali, who was for the most part a very technical fighter, George was a brawler type, just a big guy that could knock people out with one punch. These two guys were destined to fight each other, but the question was how and when. Now, Ali had been the world champion at that era and was without a doubt the most famous boxer in the world. However, he refused to be drafted into the U.S. military during the Vietnam War. Because of that, they stripped Ali of his title and removed his boxing license. So between 1967 and 1970, Ali was not able to fight anyone. But while all that was going on, George Foreman had just won a gold medal in the 1968 Olympics and was on his way to being a world champion. At the time, Smokin' Joe Frazier was the champion, and of course, Ali wanted it back. But in a fight called the Fight of the Century, Frazier beat Ali on a decision, leaving Ali to have to fight others to get another chance at the title. But of course, George Foreman was also vying for the same title and also got a shot. Foreman completely overwhelmed Joe Frazier in their fight and took the world champion belt from him and knocked him down 6 times in 2 rounds before the fight was finally stopped. Then Foreman went up against Ken North, the only other person that beat Ali. Foreman destroyed Ken Norton first 2 rounds. George Foreman seemed to be unstoppable at that time. He just took out the 2 best heavyweight fighters in the world easily. So the only person left for him to fight was Muhammad Ali. But there was a problem. Don King was the promoter for both fighters and had gotten both of them to sign a contract to fight each other. The purse was $5 million, which at the time was an insane amount of money. But King didn't have that kind of money, and the U.S. was not so friendly to King because, well, of his history in boxing. So he went looking outside the country, and what better place than Zaire, which is now known as the Republic of Congo. It was then run by a ruthless dictator named Mobutu Sese Seko. They told this ruler that if he did this fight in his country, it would certainly solidify his rule and help his regime. But still, who would put up the prize money? Well, Muammar Gaddafi, the president and dictator of Libya. Yes, the same leader that was well known for financing global terrorism. And he violated human rights on his people, one of the most corrupt leaders of all time, was later killed by his own people in the street. Anyway, he put up the cash for this massive undertaking. Now, once the fight was set, both fighters went to Zaire to train in that tropical climate. The fight was set for September 25th, 1974, but then something happened. Foreman was doing some real fight sparring and took an elbow to the eye. This required 11 stitches. So the fight had to be pushed back 5 weeks to October 30th. But it finally took place. It was thought at the time that maybe 1 billion people tuned in to watch this fight from all around the world. In the U.S., it was being showing live on closed-circuit systems in movie theaters. It was turning out to be the biggest spectacle in sports history. The question, of course, was how many rounds could Ali last before George Foreman knocked him out? It was predicted that Foreman would win, but in what round would he win? But all the predictions and stats, well, they all turned out to be wrong. It seems Ali had this secret plan. Just let Foreman hit him. It seemed though through the whole fight that Foreman was killing Ali, just pounding on him, throwing these huge punches over and over. Ali continued to say things like, "They told me you could punch, George, and that's all you got, George." He said this is George threw these massive power shots to his head and to his stomach. But coming into the 8th round, people started to see why and what was really happening. Ali had goaded Foreman into taking all these huge swings until he was completely exhausted. When it was obvious Foreman had nothing left, Ali went in for the kill. Hard right punch to the face put Foreman to the canvas. And as George tried to stand, the referee called the fight. This is where the term rope-a-dope came from. Some say it was the greatest night in sports history. But after the fight, there were all these claims of cheating, saying Ali's trainer had loosened the ropes to make it easier for Ali to lay back into the ropes and make him so it wasn't so hard to hit. Also, Foreman's water had been drugged and made Foreman dizzy. And also, that the referee had given Foreman a quick count. But all these claims were never proven. Later, the fight was the subject of the Oscar-winning documentary When We Were Kings. As Ali went up on stage to get awarded for that Academy Award, suffering from Parkinson's disease, he was helped up on stage by his friend, George Foreman. Foreman later said that losing the fight that night was the best thing that ever happened to him because after retiring, he became a Christian preacher. If you look at any polls of the greatest moments in sports, right next to Michael Phelps' 8 gold medals and Jesse Owens at the Berlin Olympics and the USA Dream Team and the South African rugby team, you will see the Rumble in the Jungle. Without a doubt, the greatest boxing match ever seen. This week, George Foreman passed away at the age of 76. His family posted, "Our hearts are broken. With profound sorrow, we announce the passing of our beloved George Edward Foreman, Sr., who peacefully departed on March 21st, 2025, surrounded by loved ones, a devout preacher, a devoted husband, a loving father, and a proud grand and great-grandfather. He lived a life marked by unwavering faith, humility, and purpose. A humanitarian and Olympian, a 2-time heavyweight champion of the world. He was deeply respected, a force for good, a man of discipline, conviction, and a protector of his legacy, fighting tirelessly to preserve his good name for his family. Interesting fact that many of George's children were named George or Georgetta, and he made a fortune later in his life selling the George Foreman grill, one of which I had. George Foreman, dead at 76. One of the greatest ever. This is Eric Lecain on the World News Jam, talking about interesting stories going on around the world right here on DZRJ and Radio Bandito TV. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, let's get to some Trump/Elon news. And there's some doozies. First of all, remember Elon Musk, right? The owner of Tesla, the head of Doge. He's been having a crazy week. He's been out slashing jobs and getting involved in many conflicts of interest. Also, it's been a big week for people trying to sell their Tesla autos. You know, I remember back when I was in my late teens and I bought a Ford Pinto. I got a great deal on that car. Got the whole car for $300. Such a great deal, but the reason it was such a great deal was because news had come out that if someone ever crashed into you from behind, then that Pinto would explode. That's why I got such a good deal. Now, these days, you can get a great deal on a Tesla because, well, people just don't like its owner, Elon Musk. Right now, it's a good time to buy a used Tesla. People are dumping those cars as well as their Tesla stock. The stock in Tesla was, I don't know, 479 at the beginning of the year, and lately it's been hovering around 222 to 224. In fact, recently, Elon had a conference call with the Tesla employees telling them not to sell their stock in the company, even though its upper management is selling its shares like hotcakes or hot batteries. And this comes just after President Donald Trump bought himself a Tesla. Had sort of an infomercial right there at the White House. Elon brought a bunch of cars to Trump and he bought one. The president even sat in it, remarked at how cool the dashboard was. But just after the endorsement of the president and after mispronouncing the word Tesla as Tesla, the stock actually went down even more. Elon even has their expensive car. To make matters worse, Tesla has had to recall almost all of its Cybertrucks because it seems the fender could fly off at any moment. This would be the 8th recall they have had on this truck so far. But the most painful news of the week for Elon came from J.P. Morgan. Their auto analyst wrote, "We struggle to think of anything analogous in the history of the automotive industry in which a brand has lost so much of its value so quickly." I wonder if Elon understands that people are not protesting the car. They are protesting Elon. But as the protests in front of the Tesla dealers, ships across country are getting bigger, there have been something else brewing at the Pentagon. It's made a lot of people start to wonder, what is Elon up to? As we know, Elon has been going after nearly every single government agency there is, firing people and cutting services and sometimes doing away with the entire agency altogether. There's been a lot of speculation about whether Elon may be having a lot of conflicts of interest by the way he has been manipulating the different agencies, but none more than this week. According to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, Musk was to have a meeting at the Pentagon to discuss with the highest level people there. Now, just to be clear, Musk is not with the military, and he is not an elected official. So many were asking, what's he even doing in the building? Well, in these reports, we found out why. It seems Musk was going to be given an overview of how the U.S. military would react if it ever went to war with China. Now, plans like this are obviously super secret. I mean, if China knew what the U.S. was planning, it would be a huge advantage to them, right? I'm sure the U.S. knows their weaknesses and we're planning to exploit them if a war were ever to materialize. So a meeting like this needs to be under the highest level of classification. Also, why on earth would they be discussing those types of plans with Elon Musk? I mean, Elon has billions in loans with the Chinese, and his biggest Tesla plant is in China. He has relationships with the government of China. Again, so why would he need to know about the Pentagon's plans if a war against China ever broke out? So anyway, this story broke, and it found its way to Donald Trump. And he said that the Pentagon people are not discussing such plans with Elon Musk. He said Elon has interest with China, so of course they would not be discussing those types of plans. So Trump said that Elon is not getting that information, even though he had an appointment. And in that appointment was to meet with the top level military to discuss China. Now, Elon's first reaction was that he said that whoever leaked this information should be prosecuted. But many people have already said that people within the Pentagon leaked this whole thing on purpose to make sure that everyone knew about this meeting and it would be stopped before a huge U.S. secret got into the hands of Elon Musk. Turns out many officials, both Democrats and Republicans, have had misgivings about Musk having access to the Pentagon. First of all, he has multiple defense contracts. And second, he's got massive loans with China. That in itself is a huge red flag. Pun intended. But to be having a meeting with 𝗡𝗲𝗄𝘀, who is the current head of the Pentagon and has literally zero experience in a job like this, it's an example of what a bad idea is. So even if Trump says Elon won't be told anything about China, the main subject was supposed to be China. But 𝗡𝗲𝗄𝘀 said, oh, it's an informal meeting about innovation, efficiencies, and smarter production. But the original meeting was supposed to take place in the tank. Now, the tank is a secure room in the Pentagon and designed for the super secret meetings, usually for the Joint Chiefs only. So why was Elon's meeting going to happen there in the tank? Well, at the last minute, according to reports, it was switched to 𝗲𝗄𝗀's office instead. But officials are still worried about what classified info might be getting into the hands of Elon Musk. Right now, his company SpaceX is putting up military satellites for the U.S. military in which he's been paid billions. They've also used his communication network called Starlink, which is also used by the Ukrainians. He has access already to information that would be very beneficial to China and even Russia. And in the meantime, he has his largest production plant for Tesla in China and has billions of loans with China. So you can see why not only are the government workers worried about Elon taking their jobs, many are just worried about him in general. This has led to, this week, a lot of town halls. These ones that we keep hearing about on the news. This is when a congressman or a senator leaves Washington, goes to the home state where they have this kind of question and answer meeting, usually in a gym or some big auditorium. So there have been many this week, and wow, the Republican officials are getting an earful. So much so that the leadership back in Washington is telling Republicans not to have these town halls because some of them can get very hostile these days. They are suggesting online town halls. That way you can just turn down the volume when they start to boo you. Right now, Musk and Trump are firing a lot of people, government workers across the board, but mainly they are firing veterans. Nothing gets people more riled up than when you treat veterans badly. I mean, Trump has treated veterans badly for years, disrespecting John McCain, a great war hero, calling people who entered the military suckers and losers. But this is really about Elon Musk and his Doge team firing thousands upon thousands of veteran workers. And people stood up and told stories of the hardships that the Trump administration has already had caused them. These are the people that voted for him, the Republicans. But what was interesting was how hostile these crowds were at these Democratic town halls. They were mad because, well, they want the Republicans and the Democrats in Congress to fight. They were actually mad at the Democrats, saying, don't be so nice, get down in the dirt with the Republicans and fight for the future of the U.S. It was really surprising in watching some of these town halls and how very up-to-date and intelligent the people at these things were, not just yelling at the congressman, but asking very pointed questions, especially about Social Security, the money paid to people after they retire. It seems like they are not doing away with Social Security. However, they are obviously going to make it very hard for seniors in the United States. Musk and his team are shutting down multiple Social Security offices across the country and firing huge amounts of staff. But the harshest new rule is that people on Social Security now need to show up at an office to make changes and fix problems. So let's say the person is in a rest home. Can the office nearest to them maybe just got closed and the phone operators have all been fired, so it's very hard to get through? It's going to make things very difficult for that senior. The problem many are having is, why is Elon even the one making these decisions? How is it that he's able to decide what will happen to the Social Security Department? This is what people are so up in arms about. They work their whole lives, and now it's time to retire, and Elon Musk is going to make it difficult for them to get their money. One of the other issues people are yelling about in these town halls is the Department of Education. Elon and Trump have vowed to get rid of the Department of Education. This past Thursday, Trump signed an executive order instructing the Education Secretary, Linda McMahon, from from the wrestling world, the WWE, to dismantle the Department of Education. Now, the Department of Education is an enormous agency with a massive budget and thousands of workers. It would take an act of Congress to shut it down, which they will not do. So what Trump basically was doing was cutting off the Department of Education at the knees. Yes, you can keep the Department of Ed. However, we're going to fire all the employees and close most of the offices. Now, why would Trump do such an unpopular thing? He said it's because the budget is way too high and the students' test scores are dropping. So he's removing the budget because it will make the test scores go up. Anyway, the test scores of a school have nothing to do with the federal budget. In fact, he says he's moving it back to the power of the states. But in reality, the states already control 90% of the public schools. What the government does is make sure states follow the rules. So make sure that there are ramps for handicapped students. Make sure schools adhere to federal rights for students, whether they are of a different religion or gay or a minority race. It deals with areas with a high number of low-income students, making sure every child has the right to an education. And this is where the problem lies. If Trump removes programs and funding for low-income areas, this, many fear, will lead to having more students dropping out of school because they don't have money to complete and lower test scores. The head of the Democratic Party this week said shutting down the Department of Education will harm millions of children in our nation's public schools, their families, and hardworking teachers. Class sizes will soar, educators will be fired, special education programs will be cut, and colleges will get even more expensive. Another congressman said the reality is that the Trump administration does not have the constitutional power to eliminate the Department of Education without the approval of Congress. However, what they will do is defund and destabilize the agency to manufacture chaos and push their extremist agenda. So, their plan is to move the education to the states. But here's where things get very, very sticky. Trump wants to fund schools he likes. In other words, states he likes, states that support him. He doesn't want to fund a school teaching black history or talking about great people in history that might have been gay. Also, there's one of the other issue that's been brought up. Trump really doesn't want the education system to get better. In fact, he wants the opposite. Now, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much. However, if you look back in time, you will see that one thing that dictators go after quickly is the education of the country. They want to be dictators, and they understand this concept, to make sure that rural areas keep their students down. Make sure that the lower IQ means it's easier for them to manipulate. This can be equated to many places around the world. Dictators don't want the general population getting smarter. Much better they don't go to college. Part of the reason blacks were not allowed to get an education in the 1800s during slavery. The rich politicians didn't want students to all of a sudden have a conscience. I remember there used to be a project done by the Department of Ed called No Student Left Behind. However, this is a good move to leave many students behind. And to add insult to injury, the private school vouchers, moving federal money into schools that are not public, schools that are in general for rich families that can afford the high tuition for private schools. In these schools, things such as discrimination can go unchecked. With no Department of Ed, these schools can deny a student based on things like the color of his skin or his religion, country of origin, maybe his sexual choice. This is something that is not supported by the U.S. general public. In fact, polling shows a bit over 60% of the public are in favor of the Department of Education. But like I said, Trump's main concern doesn't seem to be the poll numbers now. In the town halls, they seem to be saying Trump's focus is on making sure improvements are made for the wealthiest people in America. Others, such as those who are immigrants, are okay to, go back to their country. And here's the next biggest issue in the U.S. this week: getting rid of foreigners. This week, many countries, including Canada, the UK, Germany, and Finland, are warning people about traveling to the U.S. to be careful of the risks being locked up in a detention center. This week, there was just crazy things going on in the U.S. in regard to picking up people. A woman traveling from Canada for her job was picked up coming into the country and putting in a detention center for 11 days. She eventually got out. However, she was not given a reason why she was not allowed to call anyone while she was there. She was put in a cell with Spanish-speaking people only, something that you might hear about in North Korea. But it's happening right now in the U.S. Can you imagine the place that everyone seemed to want to go to? The U.S. now has other countries warning their citizens about trying to visit there. This week, there were massive deportations to Venezuela. Now, we touched on this a bit last week. This week, much has come into light about all this. It seems that many people from Venezuela were rounded up under the idea that they belonged to some kind of gang that came into the U.S. to destroy Americans' way of life. Well, they were picked up and taken to a detention center and then taken to an airport and flown to El Salvador, where they were put into one of the worst prisons on the planet. Now, why did El Salvador agree to this? Well, it could have been the money the Trump administration agreed to pay them for taking the prisoners. $6 million. Now, the problem with this is that they were not allowed to speak to a lawyer before they left, talk to their family members, and just one day they were gone. Federal judge recognized this as being illegal to do, so he ordered the Trump administration to turn those planes around and bring back the people that were arrested. It seemed that most of them were in the country legally, never committed a crime, had no police record. They were just from the country of Venezuela. Some were under a program launched under the President Biden administration, allowing them to come to the U.S. for 2 years. And if they had an American sponsor, they would work and possibly get their citizenship. Well, Trump has canceled that program entirely, and anyone under that program has been told to leave the country. Now, what is bad is sometimes the father of a family is already in the U.S., but his wife and children are waiting for the processing. Now the family has been cut off indefinitely. So anyway, these Venezuelans that were on this plane that the judge ordered to turn around did not turn around and come back to the U.S. In fact, it turns out the plane was still on the ground when the judge gave the order. But the order was totally ignored. The planes left, stopped in Honduras, and then went on to El Salvador, where the people that were on them had no evidence that they had ever committed any kind of crime. But they were locked up in what's called the Terrorism Confinement Center, a prison with 40,000 inmates, 65 to 70 inmates per room. No one is allowed to go outdoors. There's no programs or workshops or anything. The gym and the break rooms are for the guards. Trump used the Enemies Aliens Act of 1798 in order to deport these people, saying they all came from a gang, the 𝗓𝗄𝗪. Even a judge ordered that they not be deported until as such as there was any evidence at all to support Trump's claims that they were with this gang. However, Trump has said in the meantime, the president is the final word in these matters, and that this liberal judge should be removed from the bench, saying it's an Obama judge, even though the judge originally was put on the bench by George Bush. So this is where we are today. The president of the U.S. is saying that he supersedes all judges. When in reality, that's just not true. That's why it's called a democracy and not a dictatorship. This is Eric Lecain on the World News Jam here on DZRJ. Thank you for tuning in to our show. Well, it's time to take a look at the new milestone in the Israeli war this week. It's not the end of the war. It's not an extension of the ceasefire. This week, the number of deaths in Gaza due to the war has surpassed 50,000 people. And it's believed that most of those killed have been women and children. The UN is saying that the true number is way higher than 50,000 due to the fact that so many are buried beneath tons of rubble. Now, if you thought there was still a ceasefire agreement in place between Hamas and Israel, well, that is now over. The war has resumed in Israel after talks between the two sides fell apart, each blaming the other side for the restart of the war. This past Tuesday, it's believed that 400 people were killed by Israeli gunfire, and by Wednesday, Israel had already resumed its ground operations in Gaza. Now, Hamas called the latest offensive a new and dangerous breach of the ceasefire agreement. The militant group says it was committed to the ceasefire agreement, the one that it signed with Israel back in January, but on Thursday fired its first rockets as Israel since the truce collapsed because, of course, Israel won't agree to the terms of the second stage of the ceasefire. The problem is that Israel has started attacking the area of Gaza where many Palestinians have already returned because, we all thought the war might be ending. On Friday, the defense minister instructed the military to seize multiple areas in Gaza and evacuate the population. In other words, here we go again. I mean, we know what happens when the Israeli military attempts to move a population, and things are happening just as we expected. The problem with the ceasefire came under the condition that Israel must leave Gaza entirely before they would release all of the hostages and commit to a permanent end to the war. Now, many speculated, including me, that even if Israel agreed to that, they would never do it. In some ways, it's believed that President Netanyahu does not want all the hostages to be released because he doesn't want to be backed into a corner of having to retreat from Gaza. In essence, he doesn't want the war to end. If the war ends, Netanyahu would lose his reason to continue to be president. His very conservative alliances in the government might stop supporting him, and with that, he could lose his position and his freedom. Currently, he is a criminal in the eyes of the ICC. We all know who they are. Israel, as a country, is not disputing that they have killed women and children, that they knew they were bombing places filled with civilians, but they claim that it's not their fault, that Hamas put the people there as human shields. The problem with that argument is that they always use it every time there is a civilian killed, even if the Israelis are purposely targeting a school or a hospital, knowing already who is inside. This is what frustrated the Biden administration so much, that Israel didn't seem to mind who got killed. However, the Trump administration seems to be the same mind as Netanyahu. He's all for Israel. Besides, he still wants to build beachfront properties there in Gaza. But as of now, those hotels are going to have to wait. Just yesterday, Israel killed another 35 people in a pre-dawn raid. People were told to leave, and as they were leaving, the Israelis fired on them, killing 35, including a senior Hamas official. Now, is what I'm saying accurate? How can we really tell sometimes? We know there was a pre-dawn raid for sure, but did Israel gun down people as they were running away? We can only read reports coming out of Israel. The U.S. has even chimed in on this latest escalation of war, giving yet another proposal to extend the ceasefire into April beyond the holiday of Ramadan and Passover. They believe if they can just get each of the other sides to agree, then maybe it could give enough time for negotiations to begin again and lead to a more permanent solution. The bridge plan, as they call it, sets dates for the release of the rest of the hostages and a date in which all Israeli military will leave Gaza. Now, currently, it's believed that there are the 59 hostages that are remaining. 24 of those are thought to be alive. And Israel says that that's the holdup on everything, the hostages. To make the thing even more complicated, after the Israeli military killed all those people this week, the U.S. blamed Hamas for the deaths. The U.S. ambassador said, Hamas bears full responsibility for the ongoing war in Gaza and for the resumption of hostilities. Every death would have been avoided had Hamas accepted the bridge proposal the U.S. had offered them last Wednesday. Well, that didn't help the situation. Also, there is another problem arising again, as it did before. Since the bomb started dropping again, there is no way to get food to the people. The UNRWA, we have talked about them before on the show, says they only have enough flour left there for 6 days. And after that may be the end. They're saying that the situation may be worse now than it was before the ceasefire. Options to avoid another major humanitarian situation are quickly disappearing. And all this comes as Israel launched a new attack in Lebanon. The latest attack since the ceasefire back in November. This major attack is in response to a rocket attack that happened on Saturday. However, Hezbollah, they say it was not them. According to reports, of the 5 people killed in Lebanon, one was a young girl. Also another area, another different strike. 3 more people were killed. Here again, it's the same MO. Israel is targeting residential buildings. But here's the thing. Hezbollah says they had nothing to do with the original attack on Israel. They are insisting that Israel is lying about the whole thing, and it's just a pretext to kill more people. So if it was not Hezbollah, then who was it? The Prime Minister of Lebanon stated that these new attacks are dragging his country into the new war. The Foreign Minister said that there should be pressure on Israel to stop the aggression and escalation and contain the dangerous situation on the southern border. But Israel has a different take on all of this, saying that the Lebanese government must take responsibility for any attack coming from their country, no matter who it is. United Nations peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon said it was alarmed by the possible escalation of violence following the Saturday morning rocket fire. France, which helped broker the ceasefire, condemned the rocket fire and urged Israel to show restraint, while Jordan called for immediate international action to stop the Israeli aggression against Lebanon. Under the ceasefire, Hezbollah is supposed to pull back its forces to the north of the Litani River, at 30 kilometers, 20 miles from the Israeli border, and dismantle any remaining military infrastructure in the south. And in return, Israel is supposed to withdraw its forces across the UN demarcated blue line, that de facto border. But then they didn't do exactly that. We even said they wouldn't here on the show. In fact, they just didn't leave at all. Continue to hold 5 different locations in Lebanon. Now, just so we are straight, Israel has carried out repeated airstrikes during the ceasefire. They targeted what it said were Hezbollah military sites that violated the agreement. Like I said, both sides are looking for a reason to shoot their guns at each other. So this is where we are in the ceasefire agreements in Israel. As I've said before, they can agree on paper until the cows come home. But no ceasefire will ever hold unless both sides are committed to do it, which they are not. I believe that Lebanon has tried to stay out of this conflict as best it could, but you must be able to control the people in your country. Even if it was just a few people that fired those rockets, it's always going to come back to you, no matter how much you claim your innocence. In the end, it always seems to be civilians that have to deal with the egos and hard-headedness of the officials, because they are the ones getting killed. So for now, all ceasefires are off, and all wars are on. And this is the world news. Still on DZRJ and Radio Bandito TV, I'm Eric Lecain. Also, can we talk about what's going on in Yemen? As we know from past shows, the Houthi rebels are all holed up there in Yemen. They've been disrupting shipping and occasionally firing missiles, usually at Israel. But now they've gotten themselves in the crosshairs of one Donald Trump. Trump said this week that the Houthi will get completely annihilated. That's what America wants. Trump said, watch how it will get progressively worse. It's not even a fair fight. Never will be. Trump added they will be completely annihilated. He also warned Iran not to send any more weapons to the Houthis. He even went as far as saying that Iran has lessened its military equipment to the Houthis, but offered no proof at all. This week, the Americans pounded the location of the Houthis' control. 53 people have been killed since the bombing started, and of course, there are reports that some of those killed are women and children. There is speculation as to why Trump is doing the bombing raids, maybe as a distraction from other things going on in the U.S., or to send a message to Iran, or to deal with the issues going on in the shipping lanes that the Houthis keep disrupting. In any case, the U.S. is making a point. Trump also said that no terrorist force will stop American commercial and naval vessels from sailing in the waterways of the world. But he is really trying to stick it to the Iranians, obviously, saying if they don't stop giving weapons to the Houthis, then they will be in big trouble. Trump said they will not be allowed to continue their nuclear program. Now, does the U.S. really want to pick a fight with Iran right now? Well, we have no idea. But the fact that the Houthis continue to target shipping vessels and shooting at them makes me think that they are just trying to goad the U.S. into creating a larger conflict. In any case, the UN has suspended all operations in Yemen due to the people getting put in detention centers. And one UN employee died while he was in a detention center. But here's the thing. I don't think for a moment that Iran is going to abandon the Houthis. They have been together for so long. In fact, many now see the Houthis just an arm of Iran. And Iran wants to build its coalition against the U.S. and Israel. I guess the question is, will the U.S. dare escalate this attack on the Houthis to be an attack on Iran? And that'll bring together the axis of resistance. Maybe even Russia will get involved. I think they would love to come to the call of Iran. Oh, but that's just me. This is Lecain here on the World News Jam, talking about the news that's going on around the world right here on Radio Bandito TV. Protests. We've had a few here in the Philippines lately. It's a great way to get your point across and to be heard. And in some cases, just like back in the 80s in the Philippines, it can make a monumental difference. But I've seen protests, big ones. Then I saw one last week in Serbia. Looked like the whole country showed up to protest. Who'd they protest? The government. The people are really turning against the leader of Serbia right now. He's a Putin-loving, Trump-loving back politician who, according to the people, is as corrupt as they come. But all this protest, man, some 320,000 people. The whole thing got started with a couple of college kids who protested the caving in of a local train station. The concrete station was built by a company that was paid in a corruption scandal with the government, and it was, made very poorly, and it collapsed, killing many people standing underneath. I mean, that's something you could protest about, but this protest grew and grew and grew. Now it seems like the entire country is turned on the president. But the president and his administration are trying a new tactic. They're going after the media. Tell everyone in the country that will listen to all these stories that they are hearing on the media that they're all false, that the news people are really the foreign agents planted in Serbia to create confusion and chaos, that they are all a danger to Serbian society. Well, since the administration has picked up the pace on these attacks, reporters from major news networks are being harassed, even assaulted. They're being blocked from entering official events and targeted with all this disinformation. They recently raided the offices of the Center for Research, Transparency, and Accountability that runs a prominent fact-checking website there. There are safety concerns right now as the country awaits for these new elections. The Government is encouraging people to act violently toward reporters, especially the foreign ones. Now, even though many officials have resigned, the president, Vučić, says that he is staying put as president, but the people of Serbia say they've had enough. The recent protest called the 15th for the 15th, which happened on the 15th of March in regards to the 15 people who died in the collapse of the train station, was bigger than anything that anyone's ever seen in the country. Several people were arrested, several were injured, but the point was the protest was heard loud and clear. We don't want a dictatorship anymore. We want to feel safe in our homes and outside. We are tired of the corruption and what it's done to our country. We want the people who are responsible for the disaster that killed our neighbors to be brought to justice. As of now, no one has been charged with the train station incident. The opposition party is trying to capitalize on all this, but the current people in power are calling them criminal cartels. So they are demanding that elections be had now. However, some believe that no matter how the people vote, how many vote against the current president, he will still win. What is interesting is to see that the people are rejecting corruption, dictatorships, even in the face of danger. The protests can get so big that a government will have to finally listen. This is something that we have seen in this country and around the world. People becoming less fearful and standing up for things that they know are wrong. And how change sometimes is the only way that change for the good can ever happen. It's when people stand up for what they know is right. And this is Eric Lecain on the World News Jam right here on DZRJ Radio and Radio Bandito TV, bringing you the most important stories of the week so you, the Filipino, can stay informed. Please join us next week for more of the World News Jam right here in Makati, Manila. Until then, everyone be safe out there, and we will see you next week.
The views and comments of the